Ethan Shaw stepped into Zenith Capital's boardroom with measured confidence, carrying nothing more than a slim tablet and the prototype housing of his hybrid energy generator. The room gleamed with minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offering panoramic views of the city skyline, a long ebony conference table encircled by high-back leather chairs, and recessed LED lighting casting a muted glow over polished marble floors. On one end sat the firm's senior partners, men and women in bespoke suits, fingers steepled or pens tapping idly on leather notebooks, already deep in discussion about quarterly returns. Ethan set his tablet on the table and placed the compact generator prototype beside it. A cylindrical housing barely a foot tall, its upper surface sporting photovoltaic cells and a vertical micro-turbine blade. He cleared his throat. "Good morning, I'm Ethan Shaw. Today, I'd like to show you how decentralized microgeneration can disrupt fossil fuel dependence and open new revenue streams for Zenith Capital." With a single swipe, he brought up a slide deck outlining the sun-wind microgrid concept. Real-time, output charts comparing solar-only systems to his hybrid solar-wind design. Cost of ownership analyses showing 60% lower LCOE over 10 years, and community impact case studies forecasting increased productivity in off-grid regions. He explained the ultracapacitor bank he'd integrated, its graphene composite allowing rapid charge and discharge cycles, and how the compact form factor could be deployed on rooftops, rural clinics, and disaster relief hubs. As he spoke, he noticed pitifully polite smiles and the gentle shaking of heads. When he finished the technical overview, the lead partner, Marissa Cole, leaned back and folded her arms. "Mr. Shaw," she said, voice steady, "your enthusiasm is commendable, but this isn't our focus. We have ongoing commitments to large-scale solar farms and offshore wind portfolios. Small-scale generators are a distraction from our core mandates and present too many logistical risks." Ethan opened his mouth to counter with pilot project results from Senegal showing a 35% increase in evening economic activity, but Marissa raised a hand. "We appreciate the data, but our capital is best deployed at utility scale. Thank you for your time." She tapped her tablet and the room's attention shifted back to the usual performance metrics scrolling on their screens. No questions were offered, no next steps proposed. The senior partners exchanged glances, already resuming their discussion of leveraged buyouts. Ethan packed his prototype and slides, swallowing the burn of dismissal. As he walked toward the door, he glimpsed their final verdict on the wall screen. Agenda item: Defer Microgen Initiative. With a polite nod and a forced smile, he exited the boardroom, each polished step echoing on marble. No longer a presenter, but an outsider once more. By the end of that evening, Ethan found himself back in his two-car garage, its overhead fluorescent lights sputtering as if in sympathy with his bruised confidence. He cleared space on a weathered workbench cluttered with half-empty paint cans, power tools, and circuit boards, remnants of earlier tinkering that had once seemed futuristic but now felt painfully naive. He retrieved the prototype generator housing he'd brought from Zenith's lab. A sleek aluminum cylinder interrupted only by a ring of miniature solar cells and a vertical slot where the turbine blade had once spun. First, he examined the base. An ultracapacitor bank encased in polymer film, its electrical terminals still gleaming despite a light layer of dust. He unscrewed the access panel and peered inside. The graphene-enhanced capacitor modules, each approximately the size of a thick paperback, had been arranged in series to achieve a combined 200 farads of capacitance, far beyond any standard supercapacitor of comparable footprint. Yet in the lab demo, the rapid charge cycles had produced excessive heat, and during his boardroom presentation, he'd noticed an intermittent voltage sag. Ethan set to work. He removed the capacitor stack and examined the thermal interface. A thin sheet of silicone gel pressed between the modules and an aluminum heat spreader. He realized the spreader's thickness, just 2 millimeters, was insufficient to dissipate the peak thermal load during midday charge. In the kitchen, he found a thicker copper plate from an old sink fixture. Back in the garage, he cut it to size with his Dremel tool, filing its edges smooth. He then layered it atop the graphene modules, secured by custom-cut silicone mounts, ensuring even contact across the cell surfaces. Next, he turned to the microturbine assembly. The slender blade, fabricated from carbon fiber rods and 3D printed nylon hubs, had been designed for low-wind startup. But in Zenith's wind tunnel chamber, it had produced only half the predicted torque. Ethan remembered the lab engineer's offhand comment, "Your blade pitch is too shallow." Pulling on a pair of safety goggles, he removed the turbine from its bearing housing and rotated each foil section by an additional 5 degrees of pitch. He refastened the assembly, lubricated the stainless steel bearing with high-performance grease, and balanced the rotor on his finger until it sat level. No wobbles permitted. With those mechanical refinements complete, Ethan moved to the solar array on top. He carefully desoldered the ribbon cables connecting the 6 polycrystalline cells, each rated at 10 watts, and replaced them with higher efficiency monocrystalline cells scavenged from a broken solar desk lamp. Solder joints were reflowed under a temperature-controlled iron to prevent microfractures, then coated with a thin layer of UV-resistant epoxy to seal against moisture. He reattached the array at the precise tilt angle of 27 degrees he'd calculated for maximum annual insolation at his latitude. It was now well past midnight, but Ethan's adrenaline spurred him on. He wheeled the prototype onto a makeshift test platform in the driveway, a steel grate over a wood block to protect the concrete. He connected the ultracapacitor terminals to a digital power analyzer and set up an anemometer and pyranometer on tripod stands, recording wind speed and solar irradiance in real time. As the overhead street lamp cast long shadows, he activated the data logger and waited. A gentle breeze stirred, 3 meters per second on the anemometer, and Ethan manually engaged the turbine's startup clutch. The rotor began to spin, faster and smoother than ever before, climbing to its steady-state speed without the faltering he'd seen in the lab. The power analyzer registered 4 watts of mechanical input, double the previous torque test. Then, he uncovered the solar cell's protective cloth sleeve. The pyranometer read 150 watts per square meter, and the array began producing 6 watts of electrical power into the hybrid controller. Ethan watched the live graphs. Combined hybrid input rose to a stable 10 watts, charging the ultracapacitors at a rate of 1.5 volts per minute, 3 times faster than his last test. He logged every data point: wind speed, irradiance, current flow, and temperature at the copper heat spread interface, which peaked at a moderate 45 degrees, well below the critical 60 degrees threshold he'd set. As the clock struck 2:15 a.m., Ethan finally allowed himself to smile. The hybrid generator, once dismissed as a distraction, now hummed on its test stand with demonstrable performance improvements: effective thermal management, optimized turbine torque, and a higher solar conversion rate. In the quiet driveway, beneath a sky dusted with stars, he packed up his instruments. The prototype glowed softly under the street lamp, a beacon of the potential he knew Zenith Capital had overlooked. Returning to the warm illumination of his garage, Ethan documented every modification in his leather-bound field notebook: blade pitch angles, heat spreader specs, and solder-type revisions. He tagged each entry with GPS coordinates and time-stamped the results. Then, he drafted an email to his microfinance friend in Kenya, outlining plans for the village pilot, even before he'd secured backing. As he shut off the workbench lamp and slid the prototype into its corner, Ethan felt something shift. No matter how many boardrooms shut him out, this garage would always be the crucible where his side hustle found its power. By mid-morning the following week, Ethan Shaw rolled his refined Sunwind microgrid prototype into the dusty courtyard of Moatati village, perched on the edge of Kenya's tighter hills. The sun hung high, its harsh rays bouncing off the corrugated metal roofs of mud brick homes. He was greeted by Amina Wekesa, the local microfinance NGO director who had championed his side hustle as the solution our community has been waiting for. Amina led Ethan to the first installation site, the village health clinic, a single room, building where the lone nurse treated patients by the flicker of kerosene lamps each evening. Ethan placed the solar wind generator, now sporting its upgraded copper heat spreader and monocrystalline cells, on a concrete plinth beside the clinic's entrance. He adjusted the tilt of the photovoltaic panel to 15 degrees southward, aligned the micro-turbine to catch the prevailing southeast breeze, and bolted the base with torque-controlled fasteners to withstand gusts up to 20 ms. With the wiring harness secured, Ethan connected the ultracapacitor bank to the clinic's new LED lighting circuit and a 12V DC outlet. He flipped the switch. Immediately, 4 bright LED panels, each drawing only 2 watts, illuminated the exam table, and a small refrigerator for vaccine storage hummed to life. The nurse's eyes widened as she tested the outlets, plugging in her phone charger to show patients digital health education videos after dark. Next, Ethan and Amina drove the generator 2 kilometers uphill to Karua Primary School. The children, dressed in crisp uniforms, watched in awe as Ethan demonstrated the system's dual input, spinning the turbine by hand first, then exposing the solar cells to full midday sunlight. He booted a laptop powered by the ultracapacitors and projected educational materials onto a whitewashed wall. Digital lessons in math and Kiswahili streamed over a mobile data hotspot. The teachers, previously unable to use multimedia aids, applauded as students engaged actively with the interactive slides. Over the next 2 days, Ethan and Amina deployed 4 more units. At the water pump station, powering an electric pump that cut manual labour in half. At the women's cooperative, charging cell phones for a small fee that funded microloans. And at an artisanal woodshop, enabling the use of electric tools and boosting productivity. Each installation followed a strict protocol. Soil screws anchored the foundations, cable trays concealed the wiring to prevent animal damage, and the hybrid controller's display was mounted at eye level for easy monitoring. By sundown on day 3, the village gathered for an impromptu demonstration. The generator at the communal meeting hall glowed under cool white LEDs, while a USB-powered speaker played Amina's favorite song, a local gospel hymn. Farmers held tablets charged by the system, reviewing weather forecasts downloaded earlier, and an electrician trainee measured voltage and current to log system performance in a shared field notebook. Ethan reviewed the logged data. Average daily energy production had stabilized at 12 WH from solar and 8 WH from wind, exceeding his target of 15 WH combined. Charge-discharge cycles of the ultracapacitors showed less than 3% energy loss per cycle, and system uptime was recorded at 99% over the 3-day period. He signed off each entry with a GPS-tagged timestamp. As he packed up to leave, villagers lined up to thank him. The nurse spoke of safer nighttime care. The headmaster described transformative lessons. The water committee chairman celebrated reduced labour, and Amina beamed at her community's rising prosperity. Ethan shook hands, pressing printed Sun-Wind microgrid user guide booklets into their palms. Driving out of Muatati at dawn's edge, Ethan looked back at the generators, small sentinels of renewable resilience dotting the hillside. Their quiet hum was more than machinery. It was the heartbeat of a community empowered. He knew this pilot would be the linchpin for global scale-up. A proof that his side hustle, forged in boardroom rejection and garage midnight oil, could indeed power the world's underserved, and in doing so, reshape the global energy economy. That evening, Amina Wakesa posted a short video montage of the Mwatati village installations to the NGO's social media channels. Clips of the clinic lights flicking on, students cheering as their digital lessons appeared on the wall, and farmers marveling as the water pump spluttered to life. Within hours, the video had racked up tens of thousands of views. Peasants in Bangkok tagging friends, engineers in Lagos sharing screenshots, and development aid groups forwarding links to their contacts. By dawn the next day, the hashtag #JurSunWindPower was trending across East Africa. Local journalists descended on Mwatati, interviewing Ethan and Amina beside the humming generator at the water pump station. A national TV crew from NTV Kenya broadcast a feature, How a Rejected Startup Brought Light to Rural Villages. The clip showed Ethan crouched by the ultracapacitor bank, explaining thermal management upgrades as the camera panned to children, studying under LED lamps. Within 48 hours, inquiries flooded Ethan's inbox. Community organisers in Nepal seeking kits for Himalayan schools. Fishermen's cooperatives in the Philippines asking about wind turbine retrofits for coastal breezes. A startup in Brazil offering to manufacture the graphene capacitors at scale. Blog posts by clean tech influencers dissected his open source design files, available on GitHub with precise assembly diagrams, while enthusiastic hackers proposed improvements, Bluetooth monitoring modules and IoT dashboards. On the forum RR Renewables, engineers debated the merits of copper versus aluminum heat spreaders, drawing from Ethan's published thermal logs. A Brazilian hardware hacker posted footage of a home-built vertical axis rotor based on Ethan's blade pitch specifications but using 3D printed PLA tips for rapid prototyping. A French microgrid consultant aggregated performance data from dozens of volunteer-supplied trackers, building regional performance heat maps that confirmed Ethan's original lab predictions and even suggested the microgenerators could stabilize weak urban grids during peak demand hours. As viral momentum built, a clean energy policy think tank in London invited Ethan to present his village pilot case study at the Global Off-Grid Energy Summit. On stage, he shared hard data, average uptime, energy yield per square meter, and community-reported productivity increases, while the audience leaned in, recognizing the scalability of his decentralized approach. By the end of his talk, development bank representatives queued to discuss financing 100-unit solar wind microgrid programs in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. Back in his garage, late on the fifth night after his return, Ethan reviewed the analytics dashboard he'd set up, map pins lighting up as new deployments went live, GitHub stars skyrocketing, and traffic to his crowdfunding page climbing into 6 figures within days. He brushed his hand across the prototype's aluminum housing, still warm from hours of testing, and realized his side hustle had transcended every boardroom dismissal, transforming grassroots empowerment into a viral clean tech revolution that was already reshaping the global energy landscape. By the time Ethan landed back in Nairobi 2 weeks after the viral Mortate pilot, national energy officials were already calling. On his first morning, he met with Permanent Secretary Amina Odhiambo at the Ministry of Energy's gleaming new headquarters. In her glass-walled office overlooking the city, Odhiambo unfurled a draft policy proposal entitled Decentralized Power for All. She explained that recurrent grid failures and rising urban demand had exposed the limits of centralized generation. Ethan walked her team through the data from his open-source GitHub repository, performance logs from Moatate, and community-supplied reports from Nigeria, Nepal, and the Philippines. He highlighted how average daily energy output, 15 wattage from solar, 10 watts from wind, could reliably power critical services such as clinics, schools, and water pumps. Odhiambo nodded thoughtfully as he detailed the prototype's cost of ownership, a 5-year ROI for community-run microgrids financed through microloans. Within days, the ministry released a subsidy program, a 50% grant on sun-wind microgrid kits for rural cooperatives and public institutions, funded by reallocating part of the national fossil fuel levy. Simultaneously, the Ministry of Finance announced a low-interest credit line for local manufacturers to produce ultracapacitor modules and turbine components domestically, sparking a resurgence in Nairobi's clean tech workshops. Ethan then travelled to Kigali at Rwanda's invitation, joining a regional workshop on off-grid energy solutions. He presented alongside UNIDO experts and World Bank advisors, showcasing a live dashboard tracking over 500 active deployments across East Africa. Government delegations from Uganda, Tanzania, and Burundi drafted a memorandum of understanding to harmonise cross-border microgrid standards and share technical blueprints through a centralised East African energy commons. Back in Kenya, the Clean Tech Accelerator, an incubator co-founded by a consortium of multinationals, offered Ethan a slot to lead a manufacturing scale-up project. Over the next month, he collaborated with engineers to redesign his garage-built generator for injection-molded enclosures, CNC-machined turbine hubs, and standardized battery packs. Quality control protocols were codified. IP67 waterproofing tests, UL-certified electrical safety inspections, and thermal cycling trials to validate graphene capacitor resilience. By the quarter's end, Kenya's national grid, struggling with peak hour brownouts, had authorized a pilot Shunned microgrid corridor along the northern tourist route, deploying microgrids at remote lodges and park stations. These decentralized units not only powered guest facilities, but also fed surplus energy into micro-networks that supported local Maasai communities, enabling small enterprises like grain mills and mobile clinics. Ethan's side hustle had morphed into a public-private partnership, the Shunned Consortium, co-chaired by the Ministry of Energy and the Nairobi Clean Tech Accelerator. Together, they secured $30 million in blended finance from development banks, channeling funds into manufacturing scale-up, installer training programs, and a national maintenance network. Within months, what began as a single garage prototype became a cornerstone of East Africa's energy policy. Proof that bottom-up innovation, when embraced by forward-thinking governments, could rewrite the rules of a global economy reliant on centralized power. That spring, just as Shunned Consortium was scaling up deployments across East Africa, news broke of a coordinated cyber attack that crippled multiple national power grids in Europe. On a cold April morning, thousands of substations and generation control centers went offline simultaneously, plunging entire cities into darkness. Emergency services scrambled. In London, Paris, and Berlin, hospitals resorted to diesel generators. But fuel supplies ran low within hours. Data centers shut down non-critical servers, disrupting financial markets and communications. Amid the chaos, a European clean tech task force urgently scoured for solutions to keep critical infrastructure online. Their satellite-linked situation room lit up when Ethan's open-source Shunned architecture was proposed as an emergency fallback. Leveraging his consortium's modular design, teams in Germany and Italy swiftly ordered kits from local manufacturers using pre-existing microloan frameworks. Within 72 hours, convoys delivered hundreds of generators, each a self-contained rooftop unit combining solar panels, vertical turbines, and ultracapacitors directly to hospitals, data centers, and key telecom nodes. At St. Mary's Hospital in Manchester, the power flickered off at dawn. ICU monitors stuttered. But on the adjacent outpatient clinic's roof, a row of Shunned units, installed just weeks earlier under a resilience grant pilot, kicked in automatically. Their charge controllers sensed the grid loss and diverted stored energy to the hospital's emergency bus. Within seconds, lights stabilized, ventilators hummed, and critical patient care continued uninterrupted, all without diesel or manual intervention. In Frankfurt, a major financial transaction hub routed its backup power through a microgrid ring topology based on Ethan's design. 5 rooftop generators on adjacent office buildings synchronized frequency and voltage, using Ethan's open protocol inverter scheme, creating a mini AC grid that powered servers and trading platforms for over 48 hours. When grid service returned, data integrity checks confirmed no transaction losses, a testament to the microgrid's robustness. Across Europe's rural telecom outposts, cell towers and microwave relays that had gone dark, Shunned generators provided a lifeline. Network engineers, guided by Ethan's detailed installation manuals on GitHub, swapped in ultracapacitor packs and reconfigured tower-mounted antennas to draw DC power from the hybrid units. Voice and data traffic resumed, enabling emergency broadcasts and connecting displaced families. Meanwhile, Ethan coordinated remotely via video link with the consortium's Rapid Response Committee. He monitored real-time telemetry feeds, aggregate power output, capacitor state of charge, and turbine RPM from thousands of units scattered across blackout zones. His dashboard displayed green icons lighting up for each hospital and data node restored. He issued firmware patches to optimize grid islanding behavior, reducing synchronization errors under volatile wind conditions. By the end of the week, Europe's centralized grids had been fortified against future cyber threats by integrating Shunned microgrids as default island mode backups. Governments formalized procurement contracts, and the EU passed an emergency directive mandating decentralized microgrids for all critical infrastructure. News headlines celebrated Ethan's side hustle. Garage innovator powers Europe's emergency response, and Shunned microgrids keep the lights on when all else fails. In a global stock exchange broadcast, the CEO of a major cloud provider publicly announced that, from that day forward, all their data centers would incorporate distributed sun-wind microgrids as part of their resilience strategy. Venture capitalists, once skeptical of small-scale generators, poured capital into startups building on Ethan's open-source platform. His hybrid generator, born from boardroom dismissal and refined in a suburban garage, had become the de facto emergency power backbone for the world's critical infrastructure. By December's end, 2 years after his Zenith Capital snub, Ethan Shaw stood atop the newly completed Sun-Wind Cooperative headquarters in Nairobi, a gleaming 5-story facility powered entirely by the microgrid technology he had championed. From its rooftop solar wind array, clean energy flowed down to open-plan offices where engineers, economists, and community liaisons worked side by side. Below, the cooperative's global command center displayed a live world map dotted with green pins across 6 continents, each marking active sun-wind microgrid deployments supporting hospitals, data centers, farms, and schools. Ethan reviewed the year's impact report with the cooperative's board. Representatives from East African governments, microfinance institutions, and clean tech investors. The metrics were staggering. 2 billion people now accessed reliable electricity through sun-wind microgrids. Global carbon emissions had been reduced by an estimated 3.5 gigatons CO2, and emergency resilience scores in critical infrastructure had risen by 60% in countries that adopted the cooperative's distributed energy protocols. Despite offers to rejoin Zenith Capital as a high-profile partner, Ethan had chosen independence. He addressed the board. "We built this not for profit margins, but to ensure energy sovereignty for underserved communities. Our cooperative model channels member-driven investment back into local manufacturing, training, and maintenance, creating a sustainable ecosystem rather than one-off installations." Board members nodded, noting that the cooperative's revenue model, based on sliding-scale community subscriptions and impact bonds, had proven both financially robust and socially equitable. Next, Ethan joined a video call with the UN Secretary-General, whose office was coordinating a new Global Energy Equity Initiative. On screen, the Secretary-General praised sun-wind microgrids as a revolutionary blueprint for decentralized power, and invited the cooperative to co-lead a task force deploying 10 million additional units in the next 5 years, prioritizing climate-vulnerable regions. As the call ended, Ethan walked through the cooperative's innovation lab, where teams were prototyping the next generation of microgrids, integrating hydrogen fuel cell backup and advanced AI for demand response optimization. He paused at a workstation where a young engineer from Puerto Rico demonstrated a drone-assisted maintenance system, using UAVs to inspect turbine blades and solar panels after hurricanes, a direct extension of the resilience lessons learned during Europe's cyber blackout. Later that evening, Ethan attended the annual Sun-Wind Cooperative Gala, held in the rooftop garden under strings of LED lanterns powered by the microgrid itself. Community leaders, entrepreneurs, and engineers mingled, each sharing stories of how reliable power had transformed classrooms, clinics, and small businesses. A Maasai elder from northern Kenya raised his glass. "Your energy did more than light our homes, it lit our future." Toasts followed from a European hospital director, a South American coffee cooperative manager, and a Southeast Asian IT entrepreneur, all echoing the same sentiment. "We were locked out of reliable power. Now we have ownership." As the party wound down, Ethan stepped onto the rooftop's edge, gazing at the cityscape below. Nairobi's skyline shimmered with lit buildings, each fed by a sun-wind unit on some rooftop unseen. Across the world, thousands of similar scenes played out. He felt the cool night breeze swirl around the copper heat spreader prototypes drying on a nearby table, symbols of the humble beginnings in his garage. In that moment, Ethan understood the true magnitude of his journey. From being shunned in a boardroom to architect of a global cooperative energy revolution. From sidelined innovator to steward of the world's new power grid. The cooperative he had founded would ensure that no community remained in the dark. Not because of centralized decisions, but because it belonged to them. And as the lanterns glowed and laughter drifted on the night air, Ethan smiled, knowing his side hustle had become the backbone of the global economy's most vital resource: reliable, clean energy for all.